I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought at night just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello, and welcome to Season 32, Episode 2 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. My name is Kimmy.
My name is Bill.
And my name is Ryan.
Ryan, we are so excited you're here tonight. Ryan is our indie designer of this month, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. But thank you so much for making the time to be here with us.
Well, thank you for the invite. I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, we're very excited too, and we're so excited about the whole indie designer thing, and like we're starting to like get it. All the little like gears are all working together now, so it's nice. So thank you so much for being here. In today's episode, Erica Odd is intimidated by running games for kids. You got two educators on the thing and some parents. So
And a kid.
yeah, and
So
a
it's
kid.
good. I'm
Bill
ready.
counts as a
I'm
child.
ready.
So.
Absolutely.
Good panel for that question. Gergmerg asks how to improve describing scenes to players, and Thomas from Denmark has a gaming success story that literally like kind of made me tear up a little bit. It was
I
fantastic.
purposely did not read it
Okay,
yet.
good.
Like, I
It's
want to
amazing.
experience it real time, and like so the tears will be real.
Yes,
because I'm
okay.
sure it will be good.
Yeah. If you'd like to contribute a question or story to the show, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. I went through my email box today and I discovered a ton of emails that never made it to like the read section, like have been sent fairly recently since I took
Right,
over that
right.
like for whatever reason never made it to like the regular Gmail inbox part.
Weird.
So I've added them. So we're going to
Good.
start hearing some like throw-ins. I also discovered a ton of emails from the Stew era that were never opened either, that are great emails.
Whoa.
So hopefully he didn't like read them and then mark them as unread so that I am now like reading old emails that were already on the show. But we're going to start digging in a little bit and mixing in some really old gems with some of the more current emails. So
Nice.
if you randomly hear an email that says, "Dear Stu," we're just reading old emails. It's fine.
But he's
Announcements.
totally alive. I mean, it could have
He
been
is.
to him. He's
Yes,
totally
he
alive,
is.
so
Yeah.
it's all good.
Announcements. It's been a year since I took over Happy Jacks.
Yay!
And we're in our new studio. We've been here for a year. It's improved a lot. It's amazing. A lot has changed since then, and we want to know what you think. Please go to happyjacks.org/survey and fill it out. Whether you're a brand new listener, whether this is the first episode you've listened to, please go fill it out. There's information that I can pull and improve things for you. If you've been listening for decades, which is absolutely possible, please go fill it out too, because you also have things that I continue to use your wisdom to improve and make things better. I really, really love the feedback from everyone. Everything I've gotten so far is very thoughtful. I really, really appreciate it. It's just a quick little like Google form, so you can do it on your phone or whatever. And it only takes a few minutes, and it really helps us improve our content and our shows for you, the consumer. So yeah, please go do that. Now, our indie designer of the month is Ryan Kahn. Yay! Who is not only an amazing designer, but also very handsome, we found out today. So you can find Ryan at the1truek on Twitter. And you can also find him at the/1/true-Ryan-Kahn at itch.itch.io. If you just go...
Archon.itch.io actually works.
Oh,
It just
does?
redirects there. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's so much better. That's so much better.
Yeah.
Oh, everyone's been very entertained by me saying that for the last 2 weeks, so I'll say like the cool version now. And thank you so much for being in studio with us today.
Yeah, it was tough to get there, but I dealt with the traffic and just travel woes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Coming
And,
all the way from the great north of Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think this is honestly really exciting. I started doing a few more podcasts recently, and it's just been so cool meeting just other people carving out their own space in the RPG world. So this is really exciting, honestly.
Yay! Yeah, and those of you listening to the podcast, Ryan's beamed in through the power of Zoom. It looks like he's sitting next to Bill.
It does. I mean,
yeah.
I think we're handsome.
Oh, sorry,
We're
I
on the
got-
side of the table. It's
Yeah, there you go.
that's safe.
So last week we talked about your game told by it's told by stars, right? Yes.
Yeah, told by Starlight.
Starlight, that's what it is. And I actually, that was the first game of yours that I discovered. I played that with our friend Ray at a local convention recently. And it just blew my mind. It was one of those things where it was like, oh, we have a cat appearance. It's so exciting. Hello, kitty.
Yeah, it's gonna keep happening too.
It's fine. Okay.
That's good. We're pro cat.
The
It's all
magic,
good.
yeah, the magic of Zoom. And I talked about it last week and I gushed about it last week, but it was one of those things where, I'd run my games and it was in between scheduled stuff. And I went down to Games on Demand at Strategicon, which is run by Tomes, which is fantastic. And Ray was sitting there. I'd never met Ray. And like, it was just there. And like, there's like a big blank like sheet. And then it's like, okay, game starting. I guess I'll check this out. It's a story game. That's cool. That's up my alley. And it was just one of those things that just hit like on all cylinders for things I love. Like I love constellations. I love mythology. I love drawing. I love making up stuff with my friends. So it was just like, oh, this is perfect for me. Which I didn't know when we started playing. I was like, I don't know anything about this game.
Yeah.
There's, and we all started drawing dots. And then I finally, as we went, it just like was such a cool experience. So I was insta-fanned by playing your game. So
Well,
thank you.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah, I love that's out in the world, and I will play it in the future. I also like bought it like immediately. So I know we sent you interview questions for and our Patreons get
Yeah.
get access to that. But do you want to kind of just like talk a little bit about why you started like designing games? Because most of your games are all of your games are more narrative story games, which
Mhm.
I personally adore. So why did you think you wanted to put out in the world with games?
I mean, there's a part of like I just like making things and trying things out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very much the kind of person who will like try something for a couple of weeks. That was cool, and then like try something else.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, like coming up, like playing with games and mechanics and storytelling and kind of how all these things come together was just like I find it a really exciting kind of intellectual sandbox to play in,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of seeing like how can a framework of rules evoke this experience at this table, and how can I try and like create like something that has a certain effect or has a certain reception. Is just like I find it just intellectually stimulating for lack of a better term. It's fun.
Yeah. Um, I mentioned before that we're both educators, and it's
Mhm.
interesting because after I've been teaching for over a decade, and I've recently come into game design, and I've found there's a huge amount of overlap kind of between those two. It's like,
Yes, absolutely.
oh wow, by lesson planning and coming up with group projects and stuff, I've actually been doing kind of like the hardest part of game design for a while now. Uh, so like if you've ever kind of like reflected on that, like what are some of the skills from game design that you take into teaching or that are part of the crossover there?
I mean, I think games are an inherently playful thing, right? Like it's something that we use the verb to play, like play a game, and a lot of learning works best when it is playful, when it is something that is just interesting for its own sake, and something that is begging you to jump in and like figure stuff out or just mess around and see what happens. And so, kind of taking that attitude of like, how can I curate an experience that gets the people, like my target audience, excited to keep doing the thing? Because a lot of RPGs are these like, they're open ended, right? like the goal is to keep playing the game, whereas for a lot of games, like the goal is to end the game, and in a lot of cases, like end the game as quickly as possible. And RPGs just aren't like that, and lesson planning isn't like that because the idea is like, no, I want you to keep going. I don't want you to just kind of be like, yeah, well, I did that, now I'm done. What's next?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Which is despite how I my approach to hobbies, but
Oh,
but it's like, but the goal of being done
yeah.
as opposed to the goal of engagement,
So
right?
when
And
you
it's like, oh, sorry, go
no,
ahead.
you go ahead. No, you go.
Yeah, so just like taking that attitude of how can we keep this cool thing going? Like, how do I design rules that make the players want to keep playing the game? Or like, how do I get my students to just be so excited about something that they want to keep going at it?
Yeah, that is the grail there. So when you design your games, do you think about who you want to play the game, or do you come up with the concept and then slowly like figure out who what the concept's for?
A lot of my games are designed with like one or two people in mind. Like,
Mm.
this is a game that I would want to play with this person.
Oh,
And
That's very cool.
and I just assume if I put it out there that I'm not quite so unique that I'd be the only person who would enjoy something like this.
mm-hmm.
So a lot of my games, like I have a folder that's just called "Shit to Play with Pals," and that is where a lot of kind of like seeds of ideas go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, this would be a lot of fun to play with that one person because they always bring this really like. I have a friend who studied philosophy, and so whenever we get into it, there's all like when we're role playing, there's always this kind of philosophical edge, like these, you know, like playing with different ideas and talking about like different ideologies and stuff like that, um, or just embracing absurdity.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so have you then had that opportunity to do that? You've thought of someone saying, "Here's an idea for a game. I want to play that with this person." You then, to some level, get the game designed, either completed or it's in a testing phase, or just an idea you can mess around with, and then had the opportunity to play it with that person. And if you
Oh,
have, then like, did it result in the way you hoped it would?
I mean, it often ends up for something that I get to the point of releasing it publicly because there are a lot of things I'm like, here's an idea, and then I play it once. I'm like, that was fun, but that's kind of where the idea like
Right.
that was the end of the exploration. Like,
Mhm.
there was nothing necessarily more to dive into, at least not at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I have had the opportunity. Well, Told by Starlight, the first playtest I did was with a couple of friends. It was after the friend who studied philosophy, Rick, who is also a contributing writer on the Wild Sea, which is another project I'm working on.
Awesome.
Not as another contributing writer.
Mhm.
But yeah, I had this idea of like, oh, it would be fun to tell just fantastic stories with this friend of mine, and like, so I have a photo of it. It's just like a whiteboard and a deck of cards sitting around. It's like, yeah. And then we've played it more recently, and so he's really seen like the evolution of that game over like iterations, and at this point, a few years. But it's always really exciting. Like, whenever I get a chance to play with Rick, it is an absolute pleasure and joy. And so it's like, it's, I think that gaming can often create a certain kind of intimacy,
Mm.
and we have a very close relationship. So it's like, it's just, we get into this like mental play space where it feels like, this is like a big like facet of our friendship, and like this is how we connect as people. And it's like being able to play these games, like I had this cool idea that we could do, and then doing it is just like, yeah, this is why we do this stuff.
Yeah.
This is just, it's fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm like I'm good at hiding it, but I'm very socially awkward. I'm an extrovert who's socially awkward and very good at faking it. But so like gaming is one of those things, and honestly, that's like a big part of like having Happy Jacks for me is like it's my social excuse to like have people come and do friendships because I work best if friendships are on like a schedule. Which part of my like ADHD and stuff like that, it's hard because I don't, it's I don't realize how long it's been since I've seen somebody, even though, but I still feel like they're my best friend. Like I haven't seen them in a long time, and that pandemic was weird with that. And so like having this space and with gaming like that is so good. And there is this strange intimacy, especially with like playtesting friends,
Mm.
because you've got like, okay, this is my creation, like this is like this art that I'm making that's unfinished,
Right.
that I'm trying to have like you know, emotional reaction from you in a certain way. And it's and it's sort of it's not a pass fail, but it's like there's some sort of judgment involved. There's just so many layers of kind of like
It's like when you
trust.
have someone that you value their opinion, right? And you're like, I want to play this song for you that I'm writing, or I want to read you this thing, this prose, and you're like, because I think I'm onto something maybe, but you want that external
Yeah.
feedback, and it's scary,
Yeah.
right? Because you're about to lay yourself bare in a certain way, emotionally, your thought process, your creativity, and there's always the potential that they're gonna be like, oh yeah, that was real interesting, and you're like, oh, because it's so personal,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it is also, I think, and you touched on this, it's really interesting how our both desires and abilities to connect with people is so affected by the dark plague times,
Yeah.
right? Just in some ways it's really great, and I'm playing in a weekly game where I get to see people that are dear friends, but we don't live anywhere near, and I'm really grateful for that. But then I've realized that me, who's just an extrovert, right, is still a little challenging for me to get back in the groove of, I'm going to go see people. We're going to hang out. We're going to be in the same physical space. We're going to do a thing.
Yeah.
Because you just got all those muscles are atrophied.
Yeah.
So,
so much.
but this type of thing is a brilliant context to be able to do that. Like, hey, so it's 7:30, you're my friend because you're over and we're podcasting. Okay, good. See you then, buddy. And it's
Well, and it takes out the personal risk and judgment.
yeah.
It's like, okay, you're my friend because you're coming to this thing. Oh, I can't. Okay, it's a rejection of the time and the podcast, not me personally.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like my little shield for my little squishy heart. Sorry, we went way too deep into me for that. Let's swerve back to Ryan's amazing games. So I wanted to talk to this week, like really focus on your game 3 Hunters, which is actually designed to be a one shot. And this is if you're a Patreon, you will be getting a copy of this that we have purchased from Ryan to support Ryan and his designing.
Amazing.
Yes.
Thank you.
So let me just like read the little pitch about it. So 3 Hunters is a no prep storytelling game for up to 3 players. Your hunter follows 3 core ideals which can be tested throughout their journey. You discuss possibilities with your fellow hunters, and you follow your query across the world. And you play to see whether you live by your ideals or turn away from them. And it's such a really cool concept. And one of the things I've noticed, well, first off, like I've noticed there's a little bit of a theme to a lot of your games, which you also have one we're talking about that's about creating creating a tradition in the middle of winter. So you have a lot of games that touch on like community and the traditions and beliefs of community. Is that purposeful? Is that something that just kind of you keep going back to because you like it?
I mean, in the time between me realizing that and right now, only a few seconds has passed. So,
Okay.
um, but I think what I really like about games and role playing games is the storytelling potential.
Mhm.
And I think fundamentally a lot of these stories kind of rely on like how the characters interact, but also how the players interact.
Mhm.
And so I guess, as a theme of community, that's like where people are doing things together. I've also used some like games as a way to kind of explore my own identity and a kind of relationship to different cultures. So like I was born in Canada, but my mom is from Jamaica, my dad is from Trinidad, Um, I have ancestry in China and India, and so like kind of how all these different communities kind of come together is something that's kind of something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to something like the Festival of Deep Winter, it's like it is creating a winter festival by looking at the cultural touchstones, and that's the kind of thing that I have thought about. Like my grandfather was Muslim, and my grandmother was, you know, ethnically Chinese. So I would get money on Eid in red envelopes,
Uh-huh.
which is this coming together of these two kind of
Mm.
separate cultural identities, and like but being presented in a way that's kind of like it's part of the diaspora, the mixing and blending of different cultures coming together.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoy games that kind of build world build around those themes. Also, I like Microscope is one of my favorite games.
Mm.
Yes.
It's again, it's just like it's this collaboratively building, not just characters. Not that building characters isn't fun, but looking at the kind of broader elements that like the context in which characters exist.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
I remember the first time I played One Quiet Year, and it was like at a con,
Oh yeah.
at a like down in the open gaming area. Somebody's running it, and it was like transformative,
Yeah.
right? And like how tabletop RPGs can be approached,
Yeah. The
right?
Quiet Year
Yeah, it's just like
changed my life.
Fantastic game.
yeah, so good, right? And just like so, I love things like like 300s, where it's like we're gonna take this. It's like a microcosm of a moment, but it's like it's very steeped in
Mhm.
something and something important, and then how like that's what you're gonna live, like this little slice,
Mhm.
but really dive deep. And it's so cool. Like it's one of the things that, and we were talking before the show started about how we're just in this like tabletop role playing golden age right now, right? This renaissance, this like amazing
Mhm.
time period where so many people are doing actual plays or podcasts, making games, right? And the ability to get them out there to people is
Yeah.
unparalleled right now. So, I love the fact that go, God, I'd really like to explore this about myself or a culture or my heritage or my sexuality or anything. It's like someone is probably doing that and giving you a format to be
Mhm.
able to do that in a way of playing, right? And collaboratively storytelling. It's amazing. So I love it. Like I'm looking at this and go, okay, I gotta go buy all this stuff now, add it to my collection because this is like fantastic.
Yeah. Now, 300s is really cool. As a teacher, I really appreciated like the flow map, like design of it was like it really spoke to me. It's a very cool layout. But I do have to ask you, like, you don't have to share if you don't want to, but can you tell us what friend kind of inspired you to make Three Hunters? Like you said before that, like you have, like you're like this is.
Yeah.
I think of a friend that I'd want to play that with. Like, do you have a friend?
This is
Yeah.
so this is a game for Rick and Felix Isaacs, who is the designer of the Wild Sea.
Mhm.
Like the three of us we're old friends, and it's very much a game that I would want to play with them because I know that Felix will give me an interpretation of everything in there that I don't expect,
Uh-huh.
and it's going to be really interesting. And Rick is going to like go down these kind of like these rabbit holes of just like interesting thoughts and connections, and the weirder the the play setting, the more he's going to like dive into it. And I just like so when those things come together, it's like yeah, these ideas just like they're what get me excited and motivated. Like I want to play more games. So a lot of the stuff is like there's the like, oh, I think that Felix would find this really cool.
Mhm.
Like that's why the Koto Koya line exists.
Hmm.
Felix loves trains, like as just like a concept, as imagery.
Mhm.
So I was like, yeah, there's got to be something about trains in here.
That's fantastic. I love that.
So yeah,
Uh,
those are the two that this game is for, really.
I
Nice.
love that. I mean, I have to think and like reflect on that with some of my like. I feel like I probably do something similar. That's so cool that you're like that clued in on it too. Awesome.
Well, I think it's very similar to like in like especially like an ongoing campaign when you put something in there that you're like, oh, I know that this player is just going to
Mhm.
like latch on to that immediately and they're going to run with it. And it's like, and so you put it in there because you're like, it's kind of like this, you see that? You see that?
Yeah, absolutely. And like why would you not do that? Like if you
Yeah.
do that, I think that's the thing that a lot of people like overlook about like small press games a lot, more narrative games. It's like what you were saying, Bill. It's like you pick one thing and you dive in deep instead of telling like a full hero's journey arc. You're dialing in on this part of that journey, or like this one moment, and not all of them. Some of them
Right.
tell like the whole arc, but a lot of narrative games that really like they want you to focus in on one small thing and feel it deeply.
Mhm.
It's like that part. It's just a piece. It's like a slice that in that time frame, especially with games that are designed to be one shots, like Three Hunters is. It's like, okay, feel this is your parameters. Feel this thing, and it is. It's like it's planning an individual session for strangers, or for your friends. Like you design it specifically for those friends and hope other people will love it, which they do. It's so similar. So many people think are like, oh, traditional games, quotes, air quotes, versus like, oh, narrative games, also quotes. Like they're totally different. It's like, no, so much of the bones and the goal is still the same.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it ends up looking at like within that framework of the game, like the scope of the game, what are you focusing on and how do you want to focus on that? So something like Three Hunters has no randomizer insofar as like there's no dice. There's some with like you make up keywords and you draw them out of a hat. But
Mhm.
that's still
Mhm.
this kind of like but they're all created by the players. So it's still this kind of like it's you bringing something to the game, not the game providing something.
Mhm.
Uh, but the focus there is like on these kind of moral quandaries, whereas something like like D&D, the focus is just on other places, and it has like robust mechanics in order to support a certain kind of focus.
Yeah.
Mhm. And that becomes very dependent on the DM in that specific case to then supply all the other things,
Hmm.
right? It's
Yeah.
just not necessarily inherent in the system, But I think that's one of the things I love about storytelling games. It's like it kind of eschews like heavy dice mechanics or conversely it's like I'm going to give you a framework for that depth of storytelling, right, and
Mhm.
collaborative storytelling, and it's really fascinating. They can also thing I love about games like this and like Three Hunters is the idea. It's like I know if I play that's going to spark a bunch of different ideas that then are going to live in my head, and I'm going to use somewhere else, somewhere, even if it's just like telling a story or writing a song or playing a different game. So like, oh god, there was that really cool interaction that happened or that cool concept, right?
Mhm.
And to me, that's always the sign of something that's really great is when it sticks with you, right? And then it rears its beautiful head somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
I mean,
People. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just saying, like, if you've played Dialect, um, just the act
Hmm.
of creating words together.
Yeah.
I've played games where some of the words have like just persisted in my vocabulary with at least the people who are in that session.
Yeah.
Like we still use like from one of my first games of Dialect, like I still use some of those words with like a few folk.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, because it was part of our dialect, but it just like it really resonated with us.
Mm-hmm. And it's
Like
such. Yeah.
calling a friend stock because like you take stock of who's around, and
Mm.
so like when we hang out, we're taking inventory.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing and such just a beautiful game. Like
Hmm.
I was walking the first time I saw it, like I was walking by and it was just like all the aesthetic things I love, like in one thing. I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I must have this. And then I started flipping through it. I'm like, oh, I must have this.
Right.
I must have this. Such an amazing game, and also like very much about community and how it develops over time and how we bond with each other, and such a cool
Absolutely.
thing. Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people see narrative games as like too free and too open. And it's funny because it's, at least to me, I feel like it's the opposite. I
Mhm.
feel like D&Ds and games like that are so open with the concept. You know, there's very specific rules about how you do magic or how you know, hit a sword. But as far as the actual story, like there's nothing. It's totally open unless you're buying an adventure pack.
Right.
There's no,
And
there's
and
nothing
even
there.
then, depending on which one,
Yeah.
it's super open.
It's super open.
That's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and actually, but that's one of the things I kind of loved about it.
Mhm.
In that instance, it was like, there's a great framework here.
Yeah.
Well, boy, do I have to do a lot of work around it to make it. But then I'm making the story I want to present to my players and do with them.
Yeah.
Right. But I think where you're going is like it's the opposite with
Yeah.
indie games, right? Yeah.
Well, more narrative games, like they usually
Mhm.
give you very specific parameters. You know, you've got a much smaller box to play in. Like with Three Hunters, it's like you are these three characters. This is the story you're telling. Like you know, it doesn't tell you what your story will be, but it tells you you have to play in this sandbox, and here are the edges of your sandbox. It's a much
Mhm.
smaller sandbox, so there's it's actually much more restrictive, but in a way, sometimes you know. It's people who aren't used to playing that. It feels much more constrained, and yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting way of kind of like thinking about it because by giving a very I think it's again going back to teaching. Like when you tell kids, "Hey, just write whatever you want," or "Hey, write an adventure story."
Mhm.
Okay. Like you're not gonna get you're gonna get some great ones. You're gonna get some meh ones. You're gonna get
Yeah.
someone who with a blank paper who didn't know what to write. And then you know, if you say, okay, I want you to write an adventure story about an alien showing up in our classroom today, and you have to include 3 other people from our
Mhm.
class in your story, like you're going to get much better story product by giving them like those parameters because
Mhm.
they're not like just, overblown by just anything.
Yeah.
So you know, like you said, like for D&D and stuff, the DM provides
Mhm.
the boundaries there. So I don't know why I went off on that tangent.
Yeah,
but just
it's
interesting.
really interesting. Like to me, in interviews, the most boring question is, if you had an unlimited budget, what game would you make? I'm
Yeah.
like, who cares, right? What I want is guardrails and guidelines. I want to say like, oh, here's how much money you have. Here's what it's got to be. Here's who it's for. It's got to have this in it. Like, give me the constraints, and then from a designer standpoint,
Yeah.
that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
that is an exciting thing to dive into as opposed to do whatever you want. Take as long as you want. Like you're like, oh, okay. I'm just like it's oddly because for a lot of people that seems like a dream, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, we're gonna do that. But boy, it's like I would rather at least the way my brain works, my design brain works, is like I want to try to figure out how to do the interesting, hopefully clever, fun thing that fits in this box. And that's exciting. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, what I love about those limitations is also like I can do a deeper dive. Like I can say like, okay, if I want like Three Hunters, I want a game that makes people feel like they're testing their characters' convictions.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
The next step is like, okay, well, let me make sure that everything is pointing back to that one goal.
Yeah.
Something with like much larger scope. Like we were talking about more trad games. The scope in that sense is much larger because people talk about like you want to focus on exploration and you want to focus on combat and you want to focus on world building. These 3 things uh, are benefited from different mechanics, different guidelines, different constraints. With like these smaller games, like these small press games, like a lot of times, like they just do that one thing, but everything circles back to that one thing and does so I would say like in a successful game does that very well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Here's the danger of 3 designers in a room.
Yeah.
We're like, what time is it? Oh yeah,
Oh,
there's letters
45
too.
minutes in and we haven't read any emails. But so do you have anything else that you want to plug or talk about before we move on?
I guess the big thing right now is so I was a contributing writer on the original Wild Sea Kickstarter, which it launched I think 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I want to say.
Yeah.
I wrote uh, an appendix with rules for playing without a GM. So whether that's solo play or like GM full play, where the role is shared
Mm.
with all the players. I also got to write a character class called a post, your post on the ship.
Oh.
But yeah, the second Kickstarter for Storm and Root. So I guess I should say, like, for people who don't know the Wild Sea, it is a game about in a world where the world has been covered in a global forest, and people now live on top of mile-high trees, sailing on chainsaw-powered ships.
It's
So
very
it is
cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
it's like a post-fall, like nature kind of one setting, but it's not post-apocalyptic in the traditional sense of like people have largely made it, and while life looks very, very different now, people are still living happy lives. Like people are in their own way thriving.
Mhm.
But Storm and Root takes the focus up into the skies and beneath the canopy. So
Hmm.
rules about creating airships or submersibles. But that Kickstarter just closed a few days ago, and I don't think the backer kit is up yet,
Mhm.
but there will be a way to pre-order the new game. It's the art is fantastic.
It's so cool. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I backed it like immediately when I saw it. And also, people who listening to my One Ring campaign, Ray, who's in that game, is also involved in that project, which is how I found it originally. Because of your game, I met Ray at the con, and then he and I became friends, and then he came into Happy Jacks, and then I was like, hey, what other stuff do you do? And he told me about that Kickstarter. So it's like this giant like circle of how I found that Kickstarter is thanks to you making the other game. So,
Which is, I mean, those kind of stories are so like that's just how it seems to work in the indie RPG world.
100%. I love the
Uh,
story that like the indie RPG scene is all funded by the same money that just
Oh
gets
yeah, we just
that we all
pass
just
it around.
pass around to each
Right,
other.
right. Like I made some money off my thing. I'm gonna go spend it on somebody else's
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, but that's like a lot of it is like no, this is a business expense. This is R&D,
Yeah, totally. It's fine.
right?
Yeah, but it's still the money
I-
that you
Right, yeah.
need to do. Okay.
Yeah, it's exactly. I always like if I have anything up on like RPG, I'm like, oh, how much credit do I have? Oh, I gotta go buy this thing. Right? Like how much do I have an itch? Okay, I gotta go buy this thing.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
All right, so we should probably move on and do emails. I'm so glad you're here. This is amazing. Right?
Yeah, this is great,
good.
Ryan.
All right.
I'm having a great time.
Good. I'm glad. Mailbag number 1. Usually I'm like, I can't read the first email. I've been talking the whole time, but I haven't been the only one talking. It's very
Go for
nice.
it. Go for it.
Okay, me. Okay. Hello, Happy Jacks crew. Yes, it's me again, Erica Odd, the odd one in. In this email, I'm going to make a confession. Here is the long promised email I've talked about for a year or so regarding my phobia perhaps, of running games for kids. I faced bearded grognards, troll players, spotlight cogs, goofers, and I've seen it all in my decades of gaming. But the one type of player that can strike fear into my heart is... but there's one type of player that can strike fear into my heart when I see a big-eyed, round-faced kid sitting across from me at the gaming table. I want to be a good GM and set a good example, but younglings give me pause. My mind starts racing through a bunch of hypotheticals. I want to be a good GM for the new game for new gamers. So how hard do I go on rules? Let their childhood imagination run wild, rule be damned, or do I rein them in and try and teach them how the game works? Okay, there's a big list of questions. Do we, as like hosts, do we want to go through each question, or do we want to read them all and then just comment?
Let's read them all.
Okay.
Let's read them all, and then we'll just
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
pick a mix at the end.
Some of them is more like musings. They're not all like
Yeah.
specific questions. It's not really like looking for questions to all these answers. These are just things that run through her head. That leads to the next hypothetical. And then comes the waterfall. Don't go chasing water. Sorry. If I do rein them in, am I going to get a boo-hoo meltdown for saying no? How do I deal with that at the table? If I let so-and-so do X, then to be fair to others, in quotes, then do I need to let the next kid do Y, it's only fair, then it snowballs. If I get a boohoo meltdown, will I have to face an angry parent? Ooh, these are teacher fails right here, Erica. Oh, holy crap, parents! How do I know the limits of what's okay? I mean, yeah, in a game for kids,
Yeah.
there are things that are absolutely off the table, but I don't know what extra stuff parents won't want their kid exposed to. Back to being confronted by an angry parent for, I don't know, telling the kid about talking frogs or something. So I know I'm probably over exaggerating. Definitely over exaggerating. But I do so to make my point. Should I just never bother running games for kids because of the anxiety it causes me? Or am I curable? Inquiring GMs want to know. Erica Odd. Oof.
Whew, yeah. Ooh, did a lot. Did a lot in there.
I think this is a really common feeling, though.
Yeah.
I've met several people who are like, I don't know how to run games for kids.
Yeah, and
And
it's, it's something we get emails about like quite often.
Mm-hmm.
So not something that's like quite this like specific, but yeah, it's a definite thing.
It's really interesting because right now, so we have our 6-year-old, almost seven in 7
He is
days.
not almost 7.
Oh yeah, the days are long, but the years are short. Woo-hoo! But
I can't believe that.
I know it's crazy. But he is a natural GM. Oh my god, amazing stories, super creative, comes up with game mechanics on the fly. Like it's amazing, amazing. He's actually like he'll make little board games. Like I have a couple in my game collection. So I'm like, oh, this is actually really pretty good. Like maybe I should actually whip this up in a like
College
a
fun.
nicer format. Yeah. But he's now at the point he's like, oh, because he knows that I'm GMing a lot again. He's like, Daddy, I want to GM a game. I want to game master. I want to be the game master. And the first question that Erica had on here, which was like, so how hard do I go in the rules? Let their childhood imaginations run wild, rules be darned, or do I rein them in and try to teach them how the game works? And I've been like, well, look, buddy, like we should play something first because he's super not I'm going to play by anybody else's rules.
Really?
Right?
That's
I
shocking.
know. I don't know where he gets that from. But I'm like, because if you're GMing, I'm like trying to explain to him, like part of it is, your kind of some of your responsibilities to make sure that if there's rules, they're and everybody has to know what the rules are. Right. That's what Elspeth reminded him. Like, and everybody else has to know because he'll come up with rules, but sometimes it's like in situ, right? You're like, I'm doing this thing. Oh yeah, you can't do that because, when you're flying, that means you have to move 2 forward before you can stop. And you're like, well, okay. Well, that's good to know. Okay, like, and you write it down. It's a little Calvin ball going on. But anytime I bring that up, it's upsetting because he doesn't want to learn someone else's rules or those things. Like he wants to start being the one to like describing the stories and coming up with the scenarios. And a lot of time when he and I just free play, that's what we're doing. Like he has these little dragon figures and Daddy's the 5 dragons and they all have, their personalities. But on my phone, I have in my notes section, and I'm not kidding, I have the season 3, because we're on season 3 of the game, powers and equipment. And these are all he's made them. He's like, so Clay has a spell called Ricanar, which is a red energy shield. And then he has a Thunderblade, which is sort of like, this is all him just spewing this stuff out. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, maybe screw rules. Maybe that's the good thing. Like, let's just get you in the chair and you just tell us what to do. Because that's kind of what we do in free play. But he knows there's a level to it that Dada and Mama do and things where we're with friends and we're rolling dice and there's some other thing, though it may not mean much to him exactly what the numbers are. So like I really like felt that first question. And I will say personally, I started on like, no, it's really important for them to understand that there's rules and how rules work and the whole thing. And I'm just starting to come around to like, maybe he's 6, maybe that doesn't matter right now.
Yeah.
He's got plenty of time to get, told about the rules. He gets plenty of rules in his life already. Like maybe that's not so much, and definitely finding super rules light games that are more designed for kids to play at certain ages.
Yeah. What do you think, Ryan?
I mean, for the question of how hard do I go on the rules, I think there's this question of like, what do you like? Which rules and why? Because different rules support different elements of play. So if I think about playing with a 6-year-old, they are really accustomed to a lot of like really open-ended, just creative play. And if you ever watch kids playing pretend, a lot of the time is spent negotiating. It's like, well, I do this. Like, oh no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Or
Mhm.
if you do that, then I'm going to do this. Oh well, like, and they negotiate this world and the rules, and as they get older, there's more complexity. But a lot of time is spent in this kind of meta talk
Yeah.
of like, how do we play the game? I think that RPGs provide a framework for that, such that if the three of us sit down to play a game, we don't have to have that negotiation because the rules facilitate it for us.
Hmm.
So looking at like a 6-year-old, that if they're still really interested in this kind of like really free form open-ended play, which is pretty typical for a 6-year-old,
Mhm.
I wouldn't push the rules as hard. But if we're talking about like a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid, they can grok some of that structure, and that structure can actually be really helpful at that age. I think a lot of it, like with any other player, it's like there are times where I say, yeah, just like don't worry about that penalty, just roll or whatever, just take this one because I know you've had a long week and you just need a little bit of catharsis right now.
Yeah.
So much in the same way that I think a GM like watches the table and you're trying to gauge like
Mhm.
who's engaged, who isn't engaged. The same way like when you're in a classroom and you're trying to see who's engaged and who isn't
Oh,
engaged.
yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's like look how the kid is responding to what's going on. If you go hard on the rules and the kid's getting really upset, maybe you pull back a bit.
Hmm.
Or maybe it's a time if you know the kid's like you can push them a little bit and be like, yeah, I know that this sucks, but like that's part of the game too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you took what I was like thinking exactly out of my mouth, Ryan. I love it. You gotta be on the show more often. I like having another educator here. I'm not the only one who's gonna say these things. But yeah, like that the difference between like the super youngs, like the up to 6, like in
Mhm.
that free play, and then I work with 9 and 10-year-olds mostly. And you were absolutely spot on when you were saying sometimes rules help them because they're starting to enter. It's like the beginning of like the tweens and the preteens, and they're starting to be more self-conscious. That free play stuff has disappeared for the
Mhm.
most part when they're in public. They still do it like, like actually online games are a great place for them to kind of still explore that in a lot of ways. They'll still do it sometimes with very close friends, but like at school, it's all about like sports and hanging out and talking. They're starting to make that shift and having rules there in place for, okay, this is how, this is what the rules say happen at this moment, sometimes gives them courage to like jump in and do things, because they feel like, oh, the rules say it, so I'm not going to be judged for it, or things like that. They won't second guess themselves because unfortunately that's like when they start really second guessing themselves,
Mhm.
too, not for the first time, but in a way that's more similar to what we think of as like teenagers and adults second guessing ourselves and second guessing our self-worth, where the younger kids, while that is, I don't want to like dismiss that they have self-esteem issues for younger kids, they do. But up until that point, a lot of times it's, more about, oh, well, it's not, are they going to judge me for this so much as it's like, well, maybe they will, maybe we can't play this if I'm not this character. Like that's what you see them assign roles. Like Ryan was saying, they negotiate how things are done. But I noticed that with Laura Lynn, she's just turning 3. So she's just now starting to sort of pretend,
Mhm.
and she's like trying on different things. So like yesterday, she's like, I'm the mama and you're the baby. And I was like, okay. So I was like, okay, mama, baby's gonna give you your dinner now. Like, you know, and like, so she was like very like for like about half an hour, she was very dedicated to this concept that we were horses and she was the mama horse and I was the baby horse.
Mhm.
And it was like something that she kind of like was like playing with in her mind. So it's interesting to see the development of that through like really young kids who it's hard for them to pretend, but they start off by giving other people roles. Like if you give her a role, she's not quite where she can do that
Right.
in her brain yet. But if she's originated it and she knows you're this person or you're that person, she's also obsessed with Disney's Robin Hood. So she can be Robin Hood, and Dad is Prince John, Dad is Little John, and Mama's always Prince John. Thanks, kid. I love you too. You know, but so that's the first step of it is them giving roles. So it's I know Erica is not as someone who doesn't have a degree in education. It probably seems really scary, but like take a wild guess and ask them. Honestly, you can honestly ask them too. Like, do you want to really pay attention to the rules? Like you were saying, Dash was like, I don't want to play by the rules.
Right, like, okay, well then
great.
let's figure that out. Yeah.
Like kids are very good at explaining themselves usually. You know, in ways we often don't give them enough credit for being able to speak up for themselves and know what they really want in these situations. So like just ask, do you want to play a game where we pay really close attention to the rules, or do you want to just, tell a fun story and kind of play together and we can change things up a little bit. And a lot of times even the 6-year-olds will be able to do that. And I'm assuming you probably don't have a lot of opportunities to run games for people younger than 6, because that if you do, that's wild and good job. That's very brave of you.
Wow, unbelievable.
I can barely handle being a baby horse for 30 minutes with kids younger than 6. So good job.
I mean, the thing it's interesting, and I'm sorry. Go ahead, Anthony. Go ahead, Ryan. I read.
Oh no, I was looking at like some of the other elements of the question. So I mean,
I was too. The whole like meltdown parents, like
I-
that. I'm gonna leave that to you two.
I'm gonna assume you're talking about like a convention.
Yeah,
Erica.
me too. That's what I figure it is.
Yeah.
Like you're doing open
yeah.
gaming somewhere or something.
Having run some con games and have run games for kids at cons specifically, it's a very different dynamic. Like I don't deal with boohoo meltdowns at con. Like if they start having a meltdown, one, that means you probably have younger kids. You're probably not gonna have a boohoo meltdown with anyone over the age of 8. Just because by that point they're like aware of social norms enough to like not be in some random hotel ballroom and start screaming. Not all of them. Some, that's for the neurotypical kids generally. But that's why also like for most cons I've been to, there's an expectation that kids are either old enough to be independent or they're with an adult. The kids section of Strategicon, where I've run some games before, has a thing where it's like, this is not a daycare. Like you don't get to dump your young children and then go game yourself. Like you're expected to be there and participating with them.
Right.
So if that's not a rule at your con, it should be for many more reasons than them not getting along in a game, but just for safety and health reasons. Yeah, that's terrifying if that's happening.
If we look at kind of like there's a set of like how do you do like what do you do if a kid is like demonstrating like behavior that you don't want to see, like the meltdowns or trying to like claims of, oh, that's not fair. I mean, I think like there are adults who do the same thing, and the response is largely the same. You like setting clear expectations for the table and say like, this is the kind of game we're playing. These are the kinds of things that might happen. Do you buy into that? By playing the game, you're saying yes, I do, and if we don't, then we can have a conversation about that. But I mean, I run a weekly game with my students, and I've run games for kids at cons, and I've run games like with kids at cons, and I've never had like a kid get really upset about stuff that happened. And I've had tons of kids who are just like, I get hurt, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like, or they're just excited to like be a part of the action.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny because a lot of times kids are more easy to talk to about these things than adults who are having problems at the table. Because kids are used to having conversations like this. They have them all the time. Well, why did you do that? Why were you angry about that? Like, what would you like to do in this moment? What do you think you should do right now? Should you, where adults have a thing where we stop having conversations like that a lot in a lot of, situations, and definitely not, at a like table with strangers.
Yeah.
So adults tend to get like embarrassed when you start trying to have like a little bit of a critical conversation at a convention table where they're like kind of like getting upset, and you're like, okay, well, what would you like to do right now? Why, I have to be really careful with that because I tend to go into like teacher voice mode.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling? Why are you feeling that right now? And that's adults hate that, and I with good reason. Like no one should be talked to like they're a kid, or like my 3-year-old. But like you'd be amazed. Like kids are asked that all the time. They are very up on that often, and are used to having those conversations in a way that adults kind of get rusty. So like just talking to them about it too. And so you probably will have better success having that conversation with a kid than if there's an adult at your table being a jerk. Like, because the adult jerk is probably going to, one, be offended that you're trying to talk to them. Two, like, also be like, I am right, in a way that a kid is going to want to be right, but also not have the like self like to like
Right. Yeah,
throw it in your face as an adult. Like there's a little bit of like, even if they don't want even if they pretend it's not there's definitely a little bit of like adult power. So just don't underestimate your adult power.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like if I'm like when I'm running a game at a con, not that I've ever had to do this, but if someone was being rude or a jerk at my table, I would say, like, listen, either you stop doing that or you stop playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the long and short of it. If you're at my table, you're being kind and respectful to everybody. If you're not, then you can leave. And that for me doesn't change if the player is an adult or a child. Like if a child is, making things less fun, not in virtue of being a child, but because they're being rude or like they're not able to, engage with the game that is being played. It's like, well, maybe this is not the space for you. And I don't think it's wrong to say that, especially with a kid, because the power dynamic is quite different than talking to another adult.
Yeah. Like a kid has probably heard that like 4 or 5 times this last week. Like, okay, you behave in this restaurant or we are leaving.
Right.
Like they've had that all the time. Or another adult, when someone's like, I'm sorry, like this is what we're doing at this table, and if you don't like it, that's fine, but we're gonna have you go. However you say that to another adult, they're like, what? Why would you say that to me? Like, so it's so much easier to say to kids. They're very practiced in that ultimatum, like, you do this, you do your homework, or you're not going to get any Fortnite time. Like,
Right.
it happens all the time in their lives.
I'm just going to close by saying, Erica, just like you should just go for it.
Do it.
Right? Just do it. But importantly, if it really gives you anxiety, then and this is based on my interactions, like then don't do it, because there are kids that will pick up on your anxiety.
Okay, way to terrify
And
her.
then and no, I mean, and it,
yeah.
like Dash was very keyed into my moods. Right. And so if I'm upset, he knows it. And then there's a reaction there. So if I go into something where I'm like going, okay, God, okay, I'm really nervous on what's going to happen. Right. You don't want that reflection. Right. So that's the thing where even if you're not sure and there's that little anxiety there, it's like, put it down here for the hour or however long the session is going to be. Right. And probably shorter is probably better, I'm going to guess, too.
Depending again on the age.
4 hours with, 8-year-olds, maybe not. I don't know. I haven't got there yet. But, I think that's, at least from my experience, it's like come into it like excited and happy to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's, I think, I don't know. I think it's awesome, though. I think it's awesome you're running games for kids.
Yeah. And again, don't worry about parents. Like, honestly, like, if they're there with them, you can ask, like, hey, are you okay with this being in the game? Or ahead of time. Like, you should have some sort of, like, description most of the time of the game and, like, an age range. Most conventions have that. So if they're, like, if their kid is, one, old enough to sign up for their own games and go find your game and, like totally independently, that's a choice the parent has made.
Yeah.
So, okay. And if they're sitting right there, then just check with them. And
Erica's in chat. She says,
Yeah.
I don't think I'd ever willingly sign up to run a game for a gaggle of kids.
That's okay.
It's more about that not knowing the age of the players before they show up. And so sometimes the surprise kid shows up, right?
Surprise kid.
Surprise kid.
That's always fun. All right. Bag number 2. The short email.
Oh, that should be Ryan's.
Ryan, do you want to read that one?
Sure.
Okay.
Ahoy, Captain Kimmy and the Happy Jacks crew. I've been listening for many years, and as they've passed, my visual imagination has gotten worse. I find it harder to visualize, and by extension, describe scenes to players, and it's really hampering my enjoyment of GMing and my ability to do it well. Do any of y'all have tips for improving the clarity and detail of visual imagination? Many thanks, Gergmerg. P.S. Ahoy to all the Kurtz, too.
Okay. So,
Who wants to go first? You want to go first?
Ryan, do you have thoughts on this one?
Um,
I can go first if you want.
I don't know. No, yeah, you go ahead.
So, yeah, it's interesting how like I just turned 40 and I realize that's not like a huge number, but it's a huge number to me.
Sweet summer child.
Yeah, I know. But like you do notice things like changing and how I ran games when I, 13 years ago is different than I run games now. And a lot of my ability to remember details has changed. And it hits us all different. And I, first of all, I feel you with the changes. Visualizing for me is really hard to do. I tend like ahead of time. I don't remember those details. So it's like if I sit and I think about, okay, this is what Rivendell's going to look like for me, and I plan it all out way ahead of time. When I sit down at the table, I actually have trouble. I actually do worse GMing it because I start like second guessing myself and I'm like trying to remember details that I planned already, and then I think I'm getting it confused. And you can kind of hear that actually, like we hit Rivendell in my One Ring campaign sort of recently. And the first day of it, like I was like, okay, I'm gonna plan Rivendell. It's gonna be amazing. And I didn't do as well as I did the second day, where I was like, okay, fuck it, like I'm just gonna like go for my heart. What is Rivendell? And like that session, as far as my descriptions of the place went, so much better. So you kind of have to experiment a little bit is going to be my suggestion with what works for you. Maybe planning it way ahead of time, like going and looking at pictures and having like a file or printout of a bunch of pictures of the place that inspires it will be really helpful for you. Maybe you're like me where it's like, okay, if sometimes I'll have notes like if I need a certain number of rooms in a place, things that have to be accurate, I'll just have a bullet point list. And then the fluff just comes from my heart. Because otherwise it trips me up. And unfortunately, this is something that's so individual to you based on what kind of learner you are. So, like auditory learners, maybe listening to, an audiobook about, a similar setting or, a travel, audiobook of someone or someone describing things like might be something that like preps you for it. So there's a bunch of different things. I don't know, like I'm going way into teaching because I'm in that mode now. Thanks, Ryan. Okay. So, I don't know. What would both of you do?
I mean, so when I was in high school, I had an English teacher who had us read this. It's like a paragraph or like a short bit of prose that was a description of a spring day. And I remember reading it, and it's just like it was beautiful, just gorgeous language, and it completely captured that feeling of like a beautiful spring day with like a soft breeze and just the right temperature and like the scent like of flowers on the wind and it's like and after reading it all it's like there was not a single visual description in the entire paragraph.
Oh.
The author was born blind. Even without those visuals, it was still this incredibly rich description. So lean on those other senses some more. Like if your visual imagination is where you feel like you're not able to like imagine things the way you used to, like dig into some of those other things. Like in the Wild Sea, you can play a mushroom person. And so when describing this place is like I love to get into like the feel of like the ground and like the soil and mycelia, right? Like you like digging into that, the smell of growth and decay. like there's so much to pull on, like the like kind of like a damp humidity on your skin. There's all this stuff that really can give a sense of atmosphere that doesn't actually require just visual description.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I had like two notes for myself, and like I'm like tick. There's that one. That's great. And it's actually really interesting when I started getting kind of back into DMing a couple of years ago. In home games, after a few sessions, that was one thing. Like I always ask my players for notes. Like what do you like? What don't you like? What do you want to hear? What do you want more of? And one thing that Elspeth, my wife, brought up, she's like, I really want more than visual descriptions. She's like, you're really like limiting yourself right now. And I was like, oh, that's great, because I got very concerned about that. Like I really want to describe what it looks like and the height of the towers and how the sun's glistening through. And it was like, right, I'm forgetting all the other senses, right? So spot on. And like, and I think it helps when you're creating a space for the players to even be thinking about that, because those other cues will help you also better visually describe it. Right. If I in my head am thinking they're in a marketplace, I can smell fresh baked goods. Like I hear the sound of the excitement because it's market day morning and people are bustling around. But now I'm visually seeing, oh, people are bustling around because they're getting their booths ready. So the other senses, right, help with that. The other thing that I do is I also don't rely on my own powers exclusively of description, because I've got other
Yeah.
great storytellers at my table, right? And they prove it to me every session. So they recently landed in an entirely new place from an airship in my Eberron game, and it was like great. So you guys are off the ship. What are you looking for? Oh, I'm looking for a kind of thing like, oh, well, tell me what kind of a shop that is. Like you're looking for a shop. There's several. Like what are you looking for, right? Or in the Strixhaven campaign I'm running, it's like I was said literally, what is the dorm experience you want?
Mhm.
Because they're all kind of available to you. Do you want, hey, we kind of our intimate little clubhouse, which is just the three of us? Do you want? And they started describing the kind of play experience they wanted and the interactions, which started then defining the actual space. And everyone could see the space because we were all doing it at the same time, right? So feel free to lean on your players and ask them for details. If they're like
I
in a
mean,
marketplace, they're like, oh, I'm looking for a shoe salesman. Like, oh, well, tell me about this shop. What does that look like when you walk in?
Mhm.
And they'll, because players always have something in their head,
Yeah.
right?
mhm.
And so it's like, great, tap into that. Because now, not only one is it easier for me, I didn't have to come up with that, but it's exactly what the player wants because they came up with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. A really common question to hear at my table is like, if like, especially like arriving on a new place, like, describe one thing that really stands out to your character.
Hmm.
Because it's all of a sudden it's like by putting, I think what can be useful is by going through the lens of the character. It's like, what would my character care about?
Yeah.
And then some of that gets injected into the setting, which just gives another thread to pull on.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Because it's
absolutely.
important to the character because they noticed
Yeah,
it, they described it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I love starting stream sessions, because predominantly because you're trying to get people like into their character quickly because
Mhm.
you're entertaining as well than home sessions. But having like a priming question,
Yeah.
you're asking their character,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like, so what's your favorite food? Do you have a childhood friend? Are you still friends with them? Whatever they are, and then you answer it in character, right, is like so helpful. And I find that it's helpful to as a player, it's helpful. It's like, oh, right, got to put my Orgoth hat on. Okay, good. Okay, now here's what I'm gonna do. But on the flip side, as the GM, you're like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Look, here's a tidbit thing. Like, oh, they know that. Okay, that's going to be interesting. And so later, when you put that into a campaign, whether that's a place description or someone they meet or an opportunity you put in front of them, like it becomes almost subconsciously meaningful for them because that's where you got it from. So tap into your players.
One of my favorite things to ask if they're headed somewhere, especially a place that most of them haven't been, I love like, what have you heard about this place? Or like, what is a rumor about this place? Because then you can like pick and choose like which things you're going to lean into are true and which things are sort of true or inspired by something that you can like play around with, and which things are completely false. And it kind of gives you like a flavor of the town before you even like start having to really worry about it. So I love doing that.
There's a mini game that is in the Wild Sea book, intended to be played at the beginning of a session called Unsetting Questions.
Nice.
And they are questions that have no canonical answer. And so the idea is that every player gives a possible answer, and none might be true, all might be true, some might just be rumor. Like, it's just to get everyone into the same kind of imaginative space.
That's awesome.
So you just
That's
like
great.
questions of like, what is a popperberry?
Mm-hmm.
And then like you can go in any direction, and people like think there's a food, but somebody might say, oh, it's a derogatory term for or whatever, right? Or it's like it's an artifact, like it's the leftovers of after like shaving this one, after creating this one tool, there's this extra little bit that's just hanging around, and that's
That's fantastic. I love that. Very cool. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I mean, like Gergmerg, this is one of those things that I feel like it just takes it like experimenting. And honestly, a lot of it is probably you just second guessing yourself too. Like I would bet that your players are probably like not enjoying your games any less than they used to. You are probably just feeling that change yourself. It's like going upstairs and how it just is harder now than it used to be.
Stop it, Kimmy. Stop. Shut up. Stop it. I'm right here.
Okay. So I also like, if you're enjoying yourself and your players are enjoying themselves, like don't put so much pressure on yourself. Like enjoy gaming. You're doing great. Keep doing great. We love you. And thank you for writing an email. Yes. All right, mailbag number 3.
Mailbag the third. Dear Kimmy and the Fellowship of the Lasso of Truth.
Oh, I like that.
That's a good one.
I like that one.
Sorry to send another email again this week, and this one completely without any questions for the host to delve into, but I have a story I simply need to share. Have a drink, skull, and brace yourself for a story called By the Power of Ulrich. An absolutely not horrible gaming story from the bleak Scandinavian autumn. Last night, gaming with a group of teenage kids will be remembered and probably retold for years. It was so crazy and perfect that when I share the story, it will sound like a tall tale I made up.
Ooh.
So gather around and hear a bloody tale of the most Warhammerish adventure of tonight's game at the After School Gaming Club. I currently run a weekly Warhammer fantasy roleplay game with the kids at the local community center.
That's super brave.
D-
Like Warhammer specifically, like picking.
Yeah.
That's all right. Good on you.
Bardash. This evening, with 4 players, ages 12 and 13, and their motley crew of misfit characters united in a happy fellowship of a sly spy, a brave outlaw, a sneaky rat catcher, and a roguish bard.
I'm sorry. Can you have a happy fellowship in Warhammer? I thought like it's like an unhappy set. Like, isn't everybody just like murder people?
Well, maybe they're like grimly happy.
Grimly happy.
Grimly happy. There was out at night. They were out at night doing the usual skullduggery, planning how to murder a rich farmer correctly suspect of nefarious deeds, when they noticed dark, mysterious shapes sneaking over the walls of the local brewery. Of course, they decided to investigate further, and soon they found out that a group of Ungor raiders and their mighty Gore leader had begun slaughtering the brewer's family and employees, their guard dogs, and even a few innocent cows.
Not the cows. Or the dogs.
The characters joined the fight and were extremely successful in defeating half a dozen Ungors, while only getting a few superficial scratches themselves. Then they had to face the mighty Gore, the leader of the pack.
Vroom, vroom.
Luck with dice is a fiddle thing. And probably a fickle thing, too.
It's a terrible joke. I apologize.
Things started. I felt you there, though. Things started to turn bad. First, the spy was grievously wounded and lay bleeding, not only losing a finger, but forced to a fate point to avoid death. Then the rat catcher was felled with a dislocated shoulder and quickly passing into blissful unconsciousness. The bod tried to be sneaky and outflanked the gore while the outlaw had it locked in melee, but all he got for his effort was a dislocated shoulder and an agonizing time spent in the wreckage of a chicken coop before he too passed out. Obviously, dislocated shoulder, hardcore bad in Warhammer Fantasy roleplay. Like, oh God! I used to be an adventurer like you, and then I dislocated my shoulder.
Hey man, that rotator cuff. You know, you
Brutal.
need that for the sword.
I had that Tommy Gar surgery. Alone stood the outlaw, blood running badly from a deep cut in the thigh. It was a matter of rounds before he also would bleed to death. The player decided to fight on. Before he rolled the dice for his attack, he lifted his hand and made the holy sign of Ulrich, the god of war. For those not aware, the sign of Ulrich looks like something fans of rock metal would make, and is often called the sign of the horn in our reality. The player yelled, Ulrich!
Okay, wait. I have a question. Okay, I've never played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Is this a roleplay thing this kid did? Or is there actually like a buff you get for doing the sign of this?
No, I think this is a pure roleplay thing.
I think
that
is the
it is
impression I
not-
get.
magic.
Yeah, it is not like a mechanical advantage. If you do this, you get it. This is just the kid who's like, oh, you know
In
what?
it.
Ulrich!
Goosebumps. All right, like we have to find out what happened.
Then
Okay,
he rolled the
continue.
dice.
Yeah.
It was a crit. The gore stumbled and lost its footing, but was able to fight on. Next round, the player made the sign again and yelled, Ulrich! Another crit.
Oh,
The gore's left arm was broken. The foul creature of chaos screamed, tried to stand, but failed. The swing of its great axe was weak and easily parried. The outlaw was still bleeding badly, but all the players were excited. The fight had turned. The player had to stand up, unable to sit. He raised his hand, and before he could yell for Ulrich, the other players also stood. They all raised their hands and screamed at the top of their lungs, Ulrich! The dice must have heard them. Another crit, the third in a row.
oh my god.
The kid screamed in joy while the gore lost an arm and was left a bloody mess. Then the outlaw passes out, and the player had to spend a fate point to avoid his character bleeding to death. We called it a game for the night. By the way, brilliant DM move. That's exactly the time where you call it. Okay, and there we
Yeah.
go. Thanks,
And-
everybody. And scene. The players were so excited to share their story with the other kids that played tonight, and much rejoicing was shared. Before we packed up, the outlaw player told me that next week he wants to change careers and play a warrior priest of Ulrich. It makes sense,
Yep.
so no problem. The last I heard walking to my car was a group of kids over by the bicycle racks chanting, Ulrich, Ulrich, Ulrich. Best regards, Thomas from Denmark. That is, I've got
Amazing.
chills. That is amazing.
I
Wow.
think part of the magic there is that, like, I often don't think that the dice rolls are particularly important in the retelling of a story.
Mhm.
But it's not just that there was a crit or even 3 crits in a row, but like I can imagine a table of like 12, 13-year-olds, just like the hype that would have been at that table,
Mhm.
right? Like it's like they must have all been into it and just like feeling that tension, right? Like that's just
Yeah, especially with them all standing up and them all shouting it. Like,
yeah.
you can see, like, okay, one crit, okay, cool. And like just the excitement, like building. And like at that age, like they're like 0 energy or all the energy.
Right.
So they just have all the energy in that moment. And just like, and like, you know that that's a story that they will, like, 3 or 4 decades from now, probably still gaming because of this amazing moment and still probably telling that story, probably leaving out that they were like 12 and 13,
Right.
but like still telling like that story.
Yeah, like 38 years from now, they're going to be on like whatever Beamed Into Your Head space podcast is, like going like, I remember this one game. Like this, they're going to be doing their show,
Yeah.
and this is going to be like the highlight story, right? And that's amazing.
Yeah.
And to me, like that's the magic of role playing. Like that's the thing that doesn't happen in video games.
Mhm.
Doesn't have, as much as obviously I love them, right? It's the fact that things change on a dime like that, and there's the excitement of people like in the space with you, whether that's virtually or in the same physical space, and that alteration that happens in real time. And that's just like, that's amazing. And the fact that then the kid is like, I'm going to change what I do. Because obviously Ulrich has blessed him.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I've got to be a priest of Ulrich. Like, damn right you do.
Totally.
Like, oh my God, that's incredible. What a
Yeah.
great story.
Yeah, and I mean it's funny. Like I also like. There are times where it feels like the dice or whatever randomizer just like knows what the best story is. And I like randomizers, but like whether it's a fail in the moment that just makes the story so much more interesting, or like, and a lot of that I know is like the players at the table making like whatever it is, like failing forward or whatever it is. But it's just like it's epic. It's so cool. And Thomas, good on you. Like amazing. It's so cool. And yeah, first of all, super brave, amazing, and yeah, I not worthy. Well done. Well done. So cool. I love that. That was such a great
I'm glad that was the last thing, because you can't follow that.
No, you can't follow
No
that.
way.
I was really excited there was like the theme to it, like with the GMing for kids.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a perfect little
Yeah.
So there you go, Erica. Obviously, the answer is play Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
Not the answer. No.
Oh, all right.
But you know, good for them. I'm glad they're doing it, but not the answer for most kids' games. I'm just gonna, if you want angry parent experiences, that might be a good way to try it. I mean,
Grim
who knows?
happy.
All right. Thank you for joining us for season 32, episode 2 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. Please support our amazing indie designer of the month, Ryan. You can find his games at rcon.itch.io. Was that right?
You got
Okay,
it.
yeah, okay. You can also do the long one too, but that one works. Yeah, thank you to our chat mod, James V, and to our amazing Patreons who keep us ad-free and independent. You can join their amazing ranks at happyjacks.org/Patreon. Yeah, you keep us, not having to beg for money, playing games we love rather than, whatever's popular will get us ad space. So thank you so much. We love you and we appreciate you. If you want to help Happy Jacks community grow, please take the survey. happyjacks.org/survey. I know I'm giving lots of calls to action. I know it's bad podcasting or showing, whatever. And also, yeah, please go take the survey. Take the survey. If you haven't done it, I'm talking to you. If you've taken it, good job, gold star. My name is Kimmy.
This is Bill.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're going to leave you with a song today. So we're going to leave you with, you think?
No, what's the song?
The song is called The Pub That We Call Home, because this weekend is the last weekend of the Renaissance Pleasure Fair. And Bill's going to be there performing.
That's right. I'm going to be there Saturday performing. And this is off of the Epoxy Boggards album, Anchor Management, who has the amazing Tess Boyd on the cover. And I just want to throw a shout out because today is Tess's birthday.
Yay,
so
happy
I'm sure you're not listening, but I'm going to send this to you afterwards so you can hear that I remembered. It said happy birthday live. So, yeah. Super awesome.
Make her take the survey.
I will make her take the survey. And she's like, I love this show. You type my name.
So great. Yeah.
And for any of our people that are on Discord,
Yes.
tomorrow is
Game days.
Game Days.
Woohoo.
Because we have our players so excited that they just run their own stuff.
They do. They run their
It's
own games on
amazing.
Discord. It's amazing.
We love you guys.
Yeah. happyjacks.org/Discord. Okay, so many calls to action. Love you all. Listen to the song. Talk to you later. Take the survey.
Well, allow me to tell ye of a place dear to heart, of each sailor and soldier, both Slavic and smart. Each face in that place is familiar and warm, where each traveler weary retreats from life's storm.
'Tis this pub that we call home, and from her we oft times may roam. But our respite we'll find in a pint, maybe 9, in this pub that we call home.
Though married but not merry, bearing lowly life's load, and suffering the chafing of my long-winded road, entombed in the womb of this free house at Bath, her walls provide shelter from my wife's wicked wrath.
'Tis this pub that we call home, and from her we oft times may roam. But our respite we'll find in a pint, maybe 9, in this pub that we call home.
In the hours when life sours and I'm weary and beat, To the hopping and copying I need to retreat. With a pale cup of ale and my good mate's concerns, I'm rested yet weary to the battle return.
'Tis this pub that we call home, and from her we oft times may roam. But our respite we'll find in a pint, maybe 9, in this pub that we call home.
With the raging of aging in my last breath I crave, please pull up the floorboards and dig me a grave. As you rouse and carouse, pour an ale on the floor. If you listen with care, you may hear me cry more.
'Tis this pub that we call home, and from her we oft times may roam. But our respite we'll find in a pint, maybe 9, in this pub that we call home. 'Tis this pub that we call home, and from her we oft times may roam. But our respite we'll find in